Welcome back to Mr. Midnight. I'm your host, and tonight I have 7 true stories that will make you question everything you thought you knew about abandoned places. Now, before we start, I need to ask you something. Have you ever driven past an old ghost town and wondered why everyone left? Have you ever seen those empty buildings and thought, I could explore that? Well, after tonight, you won't wonder anymore. Because sometimes, those places aren't as empty as they look. Sometimes, what's waiting there has been waiting for a very, very long time. And it's patient. The people in tonight's stories, they were just doing their jobs. Normal people. Normal days. Until they weren't. And here's the thing. Every single one of them wishes they could go back and say no. But they can't. Because once you see certain things, you can't unsee them. Once you know the truth, there's no going back. So, if you're ready to find out what's really hiding in Alaska's forgotten towns, and trust me, it's worse than you think, then stay with me till the end. Hit subscribe and turn on that bell, because Mr. Midnight shows you the darkness that others are too afraid to see. Alright, no more waiting. Let's jump into story number 1. My name is David Park, and I've been driving for Uber in Anchorage, Alaska for 7 years now. Before that, I worked construction, but the long hours and cold weather were killing my back. Uber gave me freedom. I could work when I wanted, take breaks when I needed them, and the money was decent enough to pay my bills. I've driven thousands of passengers over the years. Late-night drunks stumbling home from bars, business people rushing to catch flights, tourists wanting to see the northern lights. I've seen it all, or at least I thought I had. I keep my car clean, my ratings high, and I follow all the rules. 5-star driver, they call me. I know every street in Anchorage like the back of my hand, and I'm not afraid of the weird late-night rides that other drivers won't take. The ones that go way out into the middle of nowhere. Those rides usually pay the best, and I need every dollar I can get. But what happened on October 15th, 2024, changed everything I thought I knew about my job, about myself, and about what's possible in this world. I'm telling this story to Detective Sarah Kim of the Alaska State Troopers because I need someone to understand what really happened that night. Even if no one believes me, October 15th started like any other Wednesday night. The temperature was dropping fast, maybe 20 degrees, and most people were staying inside. That meant fewer rides, but also less traffic. I'd been driving since 6 in the evening, mostly short trips around downtown Anchorage. Nothing special. A few airport runs, some grocery store pickups, the usual stuff. Around 11:30 p.m., my phone buzzed with a ride request. The pickup location made me pause by Hope, Alaska. That's about 87 miles south of Anchorage, down the Seward Highway. Hope used to be a gold mining town back in the early 1900s, but now it's mostly just a tourist stop with maybe 200 people living there year-round. Beautiful place in the summer, but kind of creepy at night, especially in October when all the tourists are gone. The ride was offering $400. That's a huge fare, even for a long-distance trip. My monthly car payment was $350, so this one ride would basically cover that plus gas. I couldn't pass it up, even though something felt off about it. Who needs an Uber from Hope at almost midnight on a Wednesday? I accepted the ride and started driving south on the Seward Highway. It's a lonely stretch of road at night, winding along Turn-Again Arm, with mountains on one side and water on the other. No street lights, just my headlights cutting through the darkness. I passed maybe 5 other cars during the entire drive. Hope sits at the end of a side road, surrounded by mountains and old mining ruins. During the day, it's pretty in a rustic kind of way. At night, it feels like a ghost town. Most of the buildings are dark, and the few streetlights they have don't work very well. The pickup location was even further out, at the end of a dirt road near some abandoned mining equipment. When I pulled up, I could see 3 people waiting in the shadows. 2 men and a woman, all looked to be in their 20s. They were standing close together like they were cold or scared. As soon as my car stopped, they rushed over and got in quickly. "Thank God you're here," the first man said as he slammed the door. "We need to get out of Hope immediately." The woman was in the middle seat, and she was clearly upset. Her voice was shaking when she said, "Something terrible happened here. We have to get to the police." The third man was looking out the back window, like someone might be following us. Just drive, please. Get us out of here." I could see they were all wearing hiking clothes. Boots, jackets, backpacks. But their clothes were dirty and torn up, like they'd been running through the woods. They smelled like outdoors, like pine trees and dirt. "Where do you want to stay?" "Go?" I asked, starting to drive back toward the main road. "Alaska State Trooper Station in Anchorage," the woman said. "It's an emergency." I wanted to ask what kind of emergency, but they seemed really scared. The smart thing would have been to call 911 right then, but they said they needed to get to the police station, so that's what I focused on. About 10 minutes into the drive, they started telling me what happened. The first man, who seemed to be their leader, leaned forward from the back seat. "We were camping near Hope for the weekend," he said. "Just hiking and taking pictures, you know? We're all from Anchorage, just wanted to get out of the city for a couple days." The woman was still crying softly. "We were hiking on one of the old mining trails when we saw something horrible." "What did you see?" I asked, keeping my eyes on the dark road ahead. The third man answered, his voice low and serious. "We saw this guy kill 3 people with an axe. Just chop them up like they were nothing." My hands tightened on the steering wheel. "You witnessed a murder?" "3 murders," the first man said. "We were up on a ridge, looking down into this clearing near an old mine shaft. There were these 3 people down there, looked like they were camping too. Then this man came out of nowhere with an axe and started attacking them." The woman showed me her phone. "We got it all on video, every horrible second of it." I glanced in the rearview mirror and could see the phone screen. It was hard to make out the details while driving, but it looked like shaky footage of people running and screaming. There was definitely blood. "We have to get this to the police," the first man said. "This guy is a monster." "Did you call 911? I asked. "No cell service out there," the woman said. "We tried, but there's no towers in that area. We've been trying to get out of Hope all day, but every time we got close to the road, we saw him, looking for us." The third man was still watching out the back window. "He knows we saw him. He's been chasing us through the woods since this morning. We've been hiding in old mining buildings, trying to stay away from him. He buried them in the old mine shaft," the first man said. "Threw their bodies down there like garbage, then covered the opening with rocks. If we hadn't seen it happen, no one would ever know those people were missing." I was getting more and more uncomfortable. These people were clearly terrified, and if they really did witness a triple murder, then maybe the killer was still out there. Maybe he was even following us right now. "What did this guy look like?" I asked. The 3 passengers looked at each other for a moment before the woman answered. "He was about your height, your build. Dark hair, maybe in his 30s. Wearing jeans and a dark jacket." That could describe half the men in Alaska, but something about the way she said it made me nervous. We were about halfway back to Anchorage when I started noticing things that didn't make sense. First, I realized that even though it was a cold October night and it hadn't rained in 2 days, all 3 of my passengers were soaking wet. Not just damp from sweat or fog, but actually dripping wet like they'd been swimming. I turned up the heat, thinking maybe they'd fallen in a creek or something while they were running from the killer. But the weird thing was, they didn't seem cold. They weren't shivering or asking for the heat. They just sat there, dripping water onto my seats. Then I noticed something else. When I looked in my rearview mirror, their reflections seemed wrong. Not missing, like in vampire movies, but distorted. Their faces looked pale and blurry, like I was looking at them through water. When I tried to focus on one of their faces in the mirror, it would shift and change, like the glass was moving. I blinked hard and looked again. For just a second, I could swear their eyes were completely black. Not just dark brown or green, but black like empty holes. "You okay up there?" the first man asked. His voice sounded different now, deeper and echoing. "Yeah, just tired," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Long drive." But I wasn't okay. Something was very wrong with this whole situation, and I was starting to get scared. The woman leaned forward between the front seats. "Driver, you need to know something important about what we saw." "What's that?" The first man's voice came from right behind my ear, even though I could see in the mirror that he was still sitting in the back seat. "The killer. He looked exactly like you." I slammed on the brakes and pulled over to the side of the highway. My heart was pounding as I turned around to look at them directly, not through the mirror. All 3 passengers were staring at me with those black, empty eyes. Their skin was pale gray, and water was dripping from their hair and clothes onto my car seats. They looked like they'd been underwater for a long time. "We're the 3 people who got murdered," the woman said, her voice now sounding like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "And you're our killer." I tried to open my door to get out of the car, but the handle wouldn't work. I pushed the unlock button, but nothing happened. The windows wouldn't roll down either. I was trapped. "You hit me first with the axe," the first man said, pointing to a gaping wound in the back of his head that I hadn't noticed before. "Right here, while I was setting up our tent." The third man lifted up his shirt to show a massive cut across his chest. "You made me watch while you killed them, then you came for me." The woman turned her head to show me where her neck had been nearly severed. "You threw our bodies in the mine shaft and covered us with rocks, left us there to rot." I was shaking now, pressing myself against the driver's side door. "I don't know what you're talking about. I've never been to Hope before tonight. I've never heard anyone." But even as I said it, images started flashing in my mind. A camping area near old mining ruins, an axe in my hands, the sound of metal cutting through bone, the weight of bodies as I dragged them to a dark hole in the ground. "You don't remember because you don't want to remember," the woman said. "But we're going to help you." The first man reached into his backpack and pulled out a phone. "Look at these pictures." The screen showed photos that made my stomach turn. Me, wearing the exact same clothes I had on right now, standing over 3 bloody bodies with an axe in my hands. My face was calm, almost bored, like I was doing something as normal as chopping firewood. "That's not me," I whispered, but I knew it was. I recognized the scar on my left hand from when I cut myself with a saw 3 years ago. I recognized the watch my father gave me before he died. "You've been picking us up every night since you killed us," the woman said. "Driving us around, listening to us beg for help that will never come." I looked at my Uber app with shaking hands. The ride history showed dozens of trips to and from Hope over the past month. Trips I had no memory of taking. The GPS logs showed I'd made this exact drive 23 times. "How is that possible?" I asked. I would remember driving to Hope. "It's almost 2 hours each way." The third man laughed, but it sounded like water gurgling down a drain. "Tonight's different, though. Tonight, you're going to remember everything." And then I did. All at once, like a dam breaking in my head, I remembered every detail. October 15th, 3 weeks ago. I'd been driving late, got a ride request from Hope. But when I got there, instead of passengers, I found 3 campers at their site near the old mines. I don't know why I did it. I don't know what came over me. I just saw the axe leaning against a tree, and something inside me snapped. I remembered feeling nothing while I killed them. No anger, no fear, no emotion at all. Like I was watching someone else do it. I remembered the sound their bodies made when I threw them down the mine shaft. I remembered how carefully I covered the opening with rocks and branches. "You've been driving us to the police station every night for 3 weeks, the woman said. "But you never actually go inside. You just sit in the parking lot for a few minutes, then drive us back to Hope. And tomorrow night, you'll pick us up again," the first man said. "And the night after that, and every night forever." I realized I was trapped in some kind of supernatural punishment. Every night, I was forced to pick up my own victims and listen to their story. Every night, I would drive them to the police, but never actually turn myself in. Every night, I would take them back to the place where I murdered them. "Why don't I remember the other nights?" I asked. "Because you can't handle the truth," the third man said. "Your mind blocks it out every morning, but the guilt is eating you alive from the inside." I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. They were shaking, and I could see dried blood under my fingernails that I hadn't noticed before. "What happens now?" I whispered. The woman smiled, showing teeth that were black and rotting. "Now you remember. And you live with what you did. Every single night, forever." The car started moving by itself, turning around and heading back toward Hope. I couldn't control the steering wheel or the brakes. I could only sit there and watch as we drove back to the place where I'd committed the most horrible crime imaginable. "We'll see you tomorrow night, David," the first man said as the car pulled into the same dirt road where I'd picked them up. The 3 passengers got out of the car and walked back into the darkness near the old mining ruins. The last thing I saw was their pale faces looking back at me before they disappeared. I woke up the next morning in my apartment in Anchorage with no memory of the previous night. I felt sick and tired, like I'd been drinking, but I knew I hadn't touched alcohol. My car was parked outside, and when I checked my Uber app, it showed I'd made $400 the night before on a long-distance ride. I should have been happy about the money, but something felt wrong. My clothes from the night before were dirty and wet, even though I couldn't remember why. There was mud on my shoes and pine needles in my hair. For the next 2 weeks, the same thing happened. I would wake up tired and confused, with evidence that I'd worked the night before, but no memory of it. My bank account showed regular payments from Uber, but I couldn't remember picking up any passengers. Then, on November 5th, everything changed. I got a ride request from Hope at 11:30 p.m., and when I accepted it, I suddenly remembered everything. The murders, the victims, the 23 previous nights of driving their ghosts around Alaska. Detective Kim, I know how crazy this sounds. I know you probably think I'm making it all up or having some kind of mental breakdown, but I'm telling you the truth. I murdered 3 innocent people, and now I'm trapped in this supernatural punishment that forces me to relive their deaths every single night. I can't stop it. I've tried staying home, turning off my phone, even selling my car. But every night at 11:30, I find myself driving toward Hope, and they're always waiting for me. The worst part is knowing that somewhere out there, 3 families are waiting for their loved ones to come home from a camping trip. 3 families who will never know what happened to the people they cared about. I'm turning myself in because it's the only thing I can do. Maybe if I confess and show you where the bodies are buried, maybe then the ghosts will let me rest. Maybe then I can finally pay for what I did. The mine shaft is about half a mile north of Hope, near the old mining equipment. Look for the pile of rocks that seems too neat, too organized. That's where you'll find them. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for what I did. I don't know why I killed them, and I'll never forgive myself. But at least now you know the truth. My name is Marcus Washington, and I've been delivering packages for Amazon in the Anchorage area for 8 years now. I started right after I got out of the Army, looking for steady work that would let me drive around and not be stuck behind a desk all day. In those 8 years, I've delivered over 50,000 packages to every kind of neighborhood you can imagine. From fancy houses in South Anchorage to tiny cabins way out in the bush. I've seen it all on this job. I've delivered to houses where people were having heart attacks, helped customers who locked themselves out in the freezing cold, and even found lost kids wandering around their neighborhoods. I've had dogs chase me, been stuck in blizzards, and dealt with customers who thought their package was more important than my safety. Amazon gave me their Safe Driver Award 3 years running, and my supervisor always puts me on the tough routes because he knows I can handle whatever comes up. But what happened 3 weeks ago in Girdwood changed everything I thought I knew about this job. I've been driving delivery routes all over Alaska for years, and I thought the worst thing I'd ever see was maybe a bear in someone's yard or a drunk customer getting angry about a late package. I was wrong. Dead wrong. Asterisk asterisk section 2. Professional context and setup, asterisk asterisk. Let me tell you how Amazon delivery works in Alaska, because it's not like the lower 48. My route covers about 200 square miles, from Anchorage all the way out to some really remote places. I drive a standard Amazon van, a white Ford Transit with the Smile logo on the side. It's got GPS tracking, a delivery scanner, and a radio that connects me back to the warehouse. On a normal day, I load up around 6 in the morning with anywhere from 150 to 200 packages. The computer system tells me the exact order to deliver them, trying to save gas and time. Most days I'm done by 6 in the evening, but some routes take longer if the weather's bad, or if I have a lot of stops way out in the bush. Girdwood isn't exactly what you'd call remote time. It's only about 40 miles south of Anchorage on the Seward Highway. It's a ski resort town, maybe 2,000 people, popular with tourists who come up from the cruise ships in summer. I'd been delivering there for years, probably once or twice a week during busy season. Nice little town, friendly people, the kind of place where everyone waves when you drive by. 3 weeks ago was a Tuesday morning in October. The weather was clear, about 35 degrees, perfect for driving. I had 180 packages that day, with 12 stops in Girdwood scattered throughout my route. Nothing unusual about any of it, just regular Amazon orders. Camping gear, books, electronics, the usual stuff people buy online. My scanner showed the first Girdwood delivery was supposed to happen around 10 in the morning. Package going to 47 Alpine Street, just some camping equipment for a customer named Jennifer Miller. Weight said it was about 15 pounds, nothing heavy. Standard delivery, no special instructions, no signature required. Just drop it off and take a picture to prove it got there. I'd delivered to that exact address maybe 6 times before over the years. Nice 2-story house with blue siding, always had friendly people. The kind of customers who sometimes offered you water on hot days or asked how your route was going. Never any problems there. When I loaded my van that morning, everything felt completely normal. I had no reason to think this delivery would be any different from the thousands of others I'd done before. Section 3. First anomaly, I pulled into Girdwood around 10:15 that morning, coming down the hill on Alaskan Highway like I always did. But right away, something felt off about the town. For a Tuesday morning, it was way too quiet. Usually, you'd see at least a few cars driving around, maybe some people walking to the store or heading to work. Girdwood might be small, but it's not a ghost town. But that morning, the streets were completely empty. Not a single car moving anywhere. No people walking around. Even the parking lot at the grocery store was empty, which was weird because they're always busy in the mornings with people getting coffee and picking up stuff for lunch. I drove slowly down Alpine Street, checking the house numbers. My van was the only thing moving on the entire street. All the houses looked normal from the outside. No broken windows, no signs of trouble, lawn still mowed and neat. But every single house had all its curtains pulled tight shut, even though it was a bright, sunny morning. When I parked in front of 47 Alpine Street, the first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. In most neighborhoods, you hear something. Air conditioners running, TVs through windows, dogs barking, something. But here, it was silent, like the whole town was holding its breath. The house looked exactly like I remembered it. Blue siding, white trim, nice front porch with some plants in pots. But all the curtains were drawn, and I couldn't see any lights on inside. The mail was still in the mailbox from yesterday, which was strange because most people check their mail every day. I grabbed the package from the back of my van and walked up to the front door. It was one of those houses where you have to climb about 6 steps to get to the porch. As I walked up, I noticed the porch boards creaked more than usual, like they weren't used to people walking on them recently. I rang the doorbell and heard it chime inside the house. Then I waited. Usually people answer pretty quick, especially when they're expecting a package. But this time, nothing happened for about 30 seconds. I was just about to ring again when I heard footsteps inside. But the footsteps sounded weird. Too slow, like someone was being really careful about where they stepped, like they were trying to remember how to walk normally. Then someone called out from inside, "Just leave it on the porch." The voice was what really got my attention. It sounded strained, like someone trying to talk with a really sore throat. But not sick sore, more like they were forcing their voice to sound different than it normally did. Like when you try to fake an accent and you have to think really hard about every word. **SECTON. 4 escalation ***. I was about to set the package down and leave, like the voice asked. "That's what I'm supposed to do anyway," customer says. "Leave it." I leave it. But just as I bent down to put the box on the porch, I heard something from inside the house that made my blood freeze. A woman's voice, high and panicked, yelling, "Help me, they're not real people." The voice came from somewhere deeper in the house, like maybe the living room. It was desperate, the kind of scream someone makes when they're really in trouble, and it was definitely a different voice than the person who told me to leave the package. I stood up and listened harder. For a few seconds, everything was quiet again. Then I heard what sounded like someone trying to shush the woman, and some kind of scuffling noise, like furniture being moved around. Now, Amazon tells us never to get involved in domestic situations. We're supposed to deliver packages, not play hero. But that scream didn't sound like a normal fight between husband and wife. It sounded like someone was genuinely scared for their life. I walked back to the door and tried the handle. I don't know why I thought it would be unlocked, but it was. The door opened right up, which should have been my first warning to get out of there. Inside, the house was dark, even though it was bright outside. Heavy curtains blocked all the windows, and only a little bit of light came through from the hallway. The air smelled weird too. Not bad exactly, but like nothing I'd ever smelled before. Kind of sweet, but also rotten, like fruit that was starting to go bad. I called out, "Hello, Amazon delivery. Is everyone okay in here?" I heard those same careful footsteps coming toward me, and then a man appeared at the top of the stairs leading down to the living room. At first glance, he looked completely normal. Average height, brown hair, wearing jeans and a regular button-up shirt. But something about his face wasn't quite right. It took me a second to figure out what was bothering me. His face looked like it didn't fit properly. Around his hairline and near his ears, the skin seemed slightly raised, like he was wearing a mask that wasn't glued down tight enough. And when he talked, his mouth moved, but the rest of his face stayed perfectly still. "Everything's fine here," he said in that same strained voice I'd heard through the door. "Just a domestic dispute, nothing to worry about." But behind him, in the living room, I could see a woman tied to a chair. She was facing away from me, but I could see her hands were bound behind her back with what looked like rope. There were dark stains on her clothes that looked like blood. The woman turned her head toward me as much as she could, and I saw her face was cut up pretty bad. Fresh cuts, still bleeding. When she saw me looking at her, she mouthed the word "run" very clearly, trying not to let the man see her doing it. That's when I really looked at the man's face again, and I realized what was wrong with it. What I thought was his skin was actually someone else's face stretched over his head like a mask. Around the edges, where it didn't fit quite right, I could see something dark underneath. Asterisk, asterisk, Section 5. Climax and survival. Asterisk, asterisk, I tried to act normal, like I believed him. "Okay, well, I'll just leave the package and get going," I said, backing toward the door. "That would be best," the man said. But his voice was getting more strained, like it was hard work to keep talking like a human being. I got out of that house as fast as I could without running, because I didn't want him to know I'd figured out something was seriously wrong. Once I was back in my van, I locked the doors and tried to figure out what to do next. My first thought was to call 911, but when I checked my phone, I had no signal. That was weird, because I always get good coverage in Girdwood. I tried driving to different spots around town to see if I could get even one bar, but nothing worked anywhere. I decided to drive to the police station and report what I'd seen in person. The Girdwood police station is just a small building on the main road, usually has 2 or 3 officers working. But when I walked in, the same thing was wrong with the cops that was wrong with the man at the house. The officer at the front desk looked normal at first, but his face had that same weird fit problem. His police uniform looked too big for him, like he wasn't used to wearing clothes that shape. And when he talked, asking what I needed help with, his voice had that same strained quality. "I need to report something strange happening at 47 Alpine Street," I said, trying to sound calm. "Oh, that's been taken care of," he said immediately, which was impossible because I'd just left there 5 minutes ago and hadn't seen any police cars. "Taken care of how?" I asked. "Domestic situation. All resolved now, nothing to worry about." That's when I noticed that everyone in the police station was moving wrong. They walked like they weren't used to human bodies, taking careful steps and holding their arms stiff at their sides. And they all had that same face, doesn't fit right problem. I got out of there fast and drove around town, trying to find one normal person to help me. But every house I stopped at had the same problem. Fake people wearing human skin masks, all talking in those strained voices, all moving like they were learning how to be human. I tried calling Amazon Dispatch on my work radio, but all I got was static. I tried starting my van to drive back to Anchorage, but the engine made a terrible grinding noise and then died completely. When I popped the hood, I found that someone had cut my brake lines and radiator hoses. Fluid was leaking all over the ground under my van. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. The van wasn't going anywhere. That's when I heard vehicles starting up all around town. Car doors slamming, engines turning over, and then the sound of multiple vehicles driving around the streets. They were looking for me. I ran into the woods behind the main road and hid behind some thick trees. From there, I could see them driving around in groups, stopping at different places and calling out my name. "Marcus," they called in those weird, strained voices. "Marcus Washington, we just want to help you understand." They knew my name, which meant they'd gotten into my van and looked at my delivery information. That really scared me, because it meant they were organized and smart enough to figure out who I was. I stayed hidden in those woods until it got dark, around 8 o'clock. The whole time, I could see flashlights moving around town and hear them calling my name. Sometimes they got close enough that I could hear them talking to each other, but their voices sounded more and more strained as the day went on, like it was getting harder for them to sound human. Around 2 in the morning, when everything finally got quiet, I made my way through the woods toward the highway. It took me almost 4 hours of walking in the dark, trying not to make noise and avoiding the flashlights I could still see moving around behind me. When I finally reached the Seward Highway, I flagged down a trucker who was driving north toward Anchorage. The driver was a normal guy, talked normal, face fit right. I've never been so happy to hear someone complain about gas prices and traffic. ***, Section 6, Resolution and Aftermath. The trucker took me straight to the Anchorage Police Department, where I told them everything that had happened. The desk sergeant listened to my whole story, wrote it all down, but I could tell he thought I was having some kind of mental breakdown. "You've been under a lot of stress lately?" he asked. "Working long hours, not getting enough sleep?" I tried to explain that I was fine, that what I saw was real, but he just nodded like he was humoring me. He said they'd send some officers to check on Girdwood, make sure everything was okay. 2 days later, those same officers came back and told me they'd found everything normal in Girdwood. All the residents were fine, nobody reported any problems, and the woman at 47 Alpine Street said she'd received her package and everything was great. But I knew those officers had been replaced too. They talked with the same strained voices as the fake people in Girdwood. Their faces fit wrong, and when they looked at me, they didn't blink as much as normal people do. I called Amazon and told them I was sick, couldn't come to work for a few days. But when I finally went back to the warehouse, my supervisor called me into his office. As soon as he started talking, I knew it wasn't really him anymore. Same strained voice, same face, doesn't fit right problem. "Marcus," he said, "I heard you had some trouble in Girdwood. Maybe you should take some time off, get your head straight." I quit that same day. Told them I was moving back to the lower 48 to be closer to family. Really, I've been staying in different hotels around Anchorage, paying cash, trying to figure out what to do next. The problem is, they're spreading. Every day, I see more people with faces that don't fit right, voices that sound strained, walking like they're not used to human bodies. They're replacing people one by one, starting with anyone who might have authority or be able to help. I've been writing this story down because I need people to know what's happening. If you live in Alaska, or if you know someone who does, you need to watch for the signs. Pay attention to people's voices. Look at how their faces fit. Notice if they're walking different than they used to. And whatever you do, don't go to Girdwood. If someone you know comes back from there acting strange, that's not really them anymore. They're wearing your friend's face, but inside, it's something else entirely. I don't know what they are or where they came from. I don't know how they're doing what they're doing. All I know is that they're here, they're spreading, and nobody believes me when I try to warn them. But I'm hoping someone out there will listen, someone who can do something about this before it spreads too far. My name is Marcus Washington. I used to deliver packages for Amazon in the Anchorage area, and I'm telling you the truth. My name is Jake Morrison, and I've been delivering pizza for Tony's Pizza in Tok, Alaska for 3 years now. I know that doesn't sound like much, but in a town this small, 3 years makes you the senior driver. I've driven through blizzards when the roads were barely passable. I've delivered to drunk fishermen who forgot they ordered food. I've even brought pizza to mining camps where the workers hadn't seen fresh food in weeks. I thought I'd seen everything this job could throw at me. But what happened last month in the abandoned town of Chisana changed everything I thought I knew about what's really out there in the Alaskan wilderness. Some things are so hungry, they'll never stop hunting. Let me tell you about Tony's Pizza first. It's the only pizza place in Tok, which means we deliver everywhere within 100 miles. Tony bought this old building on the Alaska Highway and turned it into a pizza shop because he figured truckers and tourists would always need hot food. He was right. We stay busy year-round, especially during the summer when the road gets heavy traffic heading to Canada. My delivery truck is a beat-up Ford pickup with a heated box in the back to keep the pizzas warm. The heater barely works, but it's better than nothing. I've got a CB radio, a GPS unit, and a cell phone, though the cell service cuts out pretty quick once you leave the main highway. The truck burns oil, and the transmission slips. But Tony keeps it running because buying a new delivery vehicle would cost more than the shop makes in 6 months. Most of my deliveries are pretty routine. I drive to someone's house, hand over the pizza, collect the money, and drive back. The longest trip I usually make is about 40 miles to some of the fishing lodges. Those customers tip well because they know it's a long drive. The hardest part of the job is winter driving when the roads ice over, but I grew up here, so I know how to handle it. Howney handles all the phone orders himself. He's worked in pizza for 20 years and can tell you exactly how long every delivery should take. He knows which customers always order extra cheese and which ones never tip. He's got the whole operation down to a system. That's why it was so weird when he called me into the back office on a Tuesday night in October. It was already dark outside, and we'd had a slow day. I was hoping to close early and go home. "Jake, I need you to take a delivery to Chisana," Tony said, holding up a receipt. I stared at him. "Chisana? That ghost town?" "Tony, that's got to be 90 miles from here." "I know. Customer called an hour ago. Wants 8 large pizzas delivered tonight. Paid $600 up front with a credit card." $600. That was more than most people in talk made in a week. "Who orders 8 pizzas to a ghost town?" I asked. Tony shrugged. "Maybe it's some rich guy camping out there. Maybe it's researchers. I don't care. The card went through, and the tip alone will be your best night this year." I looked at the receipt. The address was just GPS coordinates pointing to Chisana. The customer name was listed as C. Matthews, with a phone number I didn't recognize. "Did you try calling the number?" I asked. "Yeah, goes straight to voicemail. But the credit card worked, so someone real placed this order." I'd heard of Chisana, but I'd never been there. It was a gold rush boom town back in the early 1900s, but it went bust when the gold ran out. By 1914, everyone had left. Now it was just a collection of old cabins rotting in the wilderness. The state kept it as a historical site, but nobody lived there anymore. "It's going to take me 3 hours round trip," I said. "I know. That's why the delivery fee is $200. You keep half of that, plus whatever tip the customer gives you." $100 delivery fee, plus tip. I couldn't say no to that kind of money. "All right, I'll do it." Tony helped me load the 8 pizzas into the heated box. 4 pepperonis, 2 supremes, 1 Hawaiian, and 1 meat lovers. Standard order, nothing weird about it. "You got enough gas?" Tony asked. "Yeah, filled up this morning." "Good, be careful out there. Call me when you get back." I climbed into the truck and started the engine. The GPS coordinates were programmed into my unit, showing a route that would take me off the main highway after about 50 miles. From there, it was backwoods roads through thick forest. The drive started normal enough. I took the Alaska Highway south, passing the usual landmarks. The radio played classic rock, and the pizza smell filled the cab. It was actually kind of peaceful driving through the dark forest with nobody else on the road. After an hour, I turned off the highway onto a smaller road. This was where things started feeling different. The road got narrower and bumpier. My headlights showed nothing but pine trees on both sides. No houses, no other cars, no signs of people anywhere. The GPS kept telling me to continue straight, but I was starting to wonder if I'd made a wrong turn. The road didn't look like it had been maintained in years. Potholes everywhere, and branches scraping against my mirrors. Then I noticed something weird. No animals. Usually when you drive through the forest at night, you see eyes reflecting in your headlights. Deer, rabbits, even bears sometimes. But tonight, nothing. The forest was completely silent except for my engine. My cell phone lost signal about 30 minutes after leaving the highway. The CB radio wasn't picking up anything either. I was completely cut off from the outside world. The GPS said I still had 20 miles to go. 20 miles of this rough road in complete darkness. I started thinking about turning around, but $600 was $600. Besides, I'd already come this far. That's when my truck started acting up. The engine began missing, like it wasn't getting enough gas. Then the heater in the pizza box quit working. I could hear the pizzas sliding around back there as the heated air stopped circulating. "Come on," I muttered, tapping the heater controls. "Don't break down on me now." The engine coughed and sputtered but kept running. The pizza box heater stayed dead. At least the truck was still moving. 10 miles from the GPS coordinates, I started smelling something strange. At first, I thought it was the truck overheating. But this smell was different. It was organic, like meat that had been left out in the sun too long, mixed with wet dog fur. The smell got stronger the closer I got to Chisana. Finally, the GPS announced that I'd reached my destination. My headlights showed a cluster of old wooden buildings in a small valley. Some of the roofs had collapsed, and most of the windows were broken. Tall grass and weeds had grown up around the foundations. This was definitely a ghost town. I parked near the largest building, which looked like it might have been a general store or hotel back in the day. The smell was much stronger now. It made my eyes water and turned my stomach. I'd never smelled anything that bad in my life. I honked my horn twice and waited. Nothing happened. No lights came on, no doors opened, no sign of any customer named C. Matthews. I honked again, longer this time. Still nothing. I grabbed my flashlight and got out of the truck, leaving the engine running. The smell hit me like a physical force. I had to breathe through my mouth to keep from gagging. "Hello?" I called out. "Pizza delivery." My voice echoed off the old buildings, but nobody answered. I walked toward the largest cabin, keeping my flashlight beam aimed at the ground to watch for holes or broken boards. The door was hanging open, swaying slightly in the breeze. "See? Matthews?" I called. "Your pizza's here." That's when I heard it. From inside the cabin came a sound, like someone eating. Not normal eating. Loud chewing and slurping, like an animal tearing into raw meat. The sounds were wet and messy, accompanied by low grunts of satisfaction. I stopped walking. Every instinct told me to get back in the truck and leave. But I needed that money, and maybe the customer was just really hungry. "Pizza delivery." I called again. The eating sound stopped immediately. Complete silence for about 10 seconds. Then, a voice answered from deep inside the cabin. "Bring food." Inside. The voice was wrong. It sounded like someone trying to remember how to talk. The words came out slow and slurred, with long pauses between them, and there was something else underneath the words, like growling. I should have left right then. But the customer had paid $600, and I had a job to do. I went back to the truck and grabbed 4 of the pizza boxes. I'd bring them to the door and set them down, collect my tip, and get out of there. The cabin door was wider than I'd thought, hanging crooked on rusty hinges. I stepped through the doorway with my flashlight in one hand and pizza boxes in the other. The smell inside almost knocked me over. It was the same rotting meat smell, but 10 times stronger. I had to fight not to throw up all over the pizzas. My flashlight beam swept across the room, and I saw what was making the smell. Bones. Hundreds of them scattered across the floor. Some looked like deer or elk bones, but others were clearly human. Leg bones, rib cages, skulls. All of them had been gnawed clean, with deep tooth marks gouged into the surface. In the far corner of the room, hunched over a pile of fresh meat, was something that might have once been a person. It was huge, at least 8 feet tall, but so thin I could see every rib through its gray skin. Its arms were way too long for its body, hanging down almost to the floor. Instead of hands, it had black claws that looked like they'd been felled, dipped in dried blood. When my flashlight hit it, the thing slowly turned to look at me. Its face was mostly gone, just a skull with strips of rotting flesh hanging off it like old leather. Its eyes were completely black, no white parts at all. When it opened its mouth, I saw rows of needle-sharp teeth, more like a shark than a human. "More food," it whispered in that horrible voice. I dropped the pizza boxes and ran. Behind me, I heard the thing stand up to its full height. Wood cracked and splintered as it burst through the cabin wall instead of using the door. It moved like a giant spider, running on its hands and feet faster than anything that size should be able to move. I reached my truck and threw myself into the driver's seat. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely get the truck in reverse. In my rearview mirror, I could see the creature racing toward me, covering ground with impossible speed. I floored the gas pedal and shot backward. The thing leaped through the air and landed on my hood with a sound like a car crash. Its claws punched right through the metal, anchoring it to my truck. It pressed its face against the windshield and started clawing at the glass. The sound was like fingernails on a chalkboard, but 100 times louder. Cracks spread across the windshield as those black claws scraped and gouged. I could see its face clearly now through the cracked glass. Where its nose should have been was just a hole. Its black tongue was as long as my forearm, licking the outside of the windshield and leaving trails of thick, yellow saliva. I yanked the steering wheel back and forth, trying to throw it off, but its claws were embedded too deep in the hood. The truck swayed and bounced, but the creature held on. Up ahead, I could see a large pine tree at the edge of the clearing. I aimed straight for it and floored the accelerator. At the last possible second, I jerked the wheel hard to the right. The creature's left side slammed into the tree trunk with a sound like breaking bones. It tumbled off my hood and rolled into the forest, letting out a shriek that didn't sound like anything that should exist on Earth. I didn't stop to see if it was dead. I kept my foot on the gas and drove as fast as that old truck would go down the bumpy forest road. Branches scraped against the windows and rocks pinged off the undercarriage, but I didn't slow down until I reached the main highway. When I got back to Tony's, I told him the customer had canceled the order. I said I'd driven all the way to Chisana, but nobody was there, so I'd brought the pizzas back. Tony wasn't happy about losing $600, but he didn't blame me. I tried to forget about what I'd seen, but it wasn't that easy. The next week, a story appeared in the local newspaper. A hiker had found human remains scattered around the old buildings in Chisana. The bones had been gnawed clean and arranged in strange patterns around the cabins. The state troopers investigated, but they couldn't explain what had killed the victims or why the bones were arranged that way. Search and rescue teams reported hearing inhuman screams echoing from the valley at night. After a week of searching, they gave up and declared the area off-limits to hikers. I started researching Chisana's history online. What I found made my blood run cold. During the harsh winter of 1913, several miners had gone missing. One survivor's journal described his partner changing after they ran out of food and started eating the bodies of other miners who had died. According to the journal, the partner developed an unstoppable hunger for human flesh. He got taller and thinner, his arms grew longer, and his fingernails turned into claws. The journal ended with the writer barricading himself in a cabin while something clawed at the walls outside, begging him to come out so it could feed. I found more stories online about similar creatures. Native Alaskan legends called them Wendigos. According to the stories, they were humans who had eaten human flesh and been transformed into cannibalistic monsters. The transformation happened slowly, starting with an overwhelming hunger that could never be satisfied. They became taller, thinner, and stronger, developing supernatural speed and the ability to climb walls. They lost most of their human intelligence, but kept just enough to mimic human speech and lure victims. I've stopped taking delivery orders to remote locations. Tony wasn't happy about it, but I told him I had car trouble and couldn't make long trips anymore. But I think the thing from Chisana followed me home. Last week, I found deep claw marks gouged into the side of my truck. They weren't there when I parked it, and they were too big to be from any normal animal. 3 days ago, my security camera caught something lurking around my house at 3 in the morning. In the grainy footage, I can see a tall, thin figure standing upright in my yard. Its arms hang down to its knees, and it seems to be sniffing the air around my front door like a dog picking up a scent. The figure only appears for about 30 seconds before disappearing back into the woods behind my house. I'm moving to Anchorage next month. I've already put in my 2 weeks' notice at Tony's and found a job at a pizza place in the city. I told Tony I want to be closer to my girlfriend, but the real reason is that I think that thing is getting hungry again. Sometimes I wake up at night to the sound of claws scratching at my bedroom window. When I look outside, I don't see anything, but I can smell that rotting meat odor drifting through the trees. Last night, I heard that voice again, the same one from the cabin in Chisana. It was standing somewhere in the forest behind my house, calling my name in that slow, slurred way. Jake, more. Food. Jake, I think it remembers me. I think it knows I brought food before, and it wants me to bring more. But next time, I don't think it's going to be satisfied with pizza. If you ever order food for delivery in Alaska, make sure you're really who you say you are. And if the delivery driver seems nervous or scared, don't blame them. They might have seen things that no one should ever have to see. Some things are so hungry they'll wait forever for their next meal, and once they know where you live, they'll never stop coming. I'm leaving Alaska in 2 weeks, but I don't think distance matters to something like that. I have a feeling that no matter where I go, I'll always be looking over my shoulder, waiting for the day when it decides to follow me to my new home. Because deep down, I know the truth. I was never the delivery driver that night in Chisana. I was the one being delivered. My name is Tom Rodriguez. I was a school bus driver in Alaska for 15 years until 3 weeks ago. I'm recording this on a burner phone from a motel room in Anchorage because nobody believes what I found in those corporate files. They think I had a breakdown. They think the isolation got to me. But I know what I saw in that ghost town, and I know why they're covering it up. My daughter Emma is 8 years old, same age as those kids in Chicken, same age as the kids who keep dying because people like me stay quiet. That's why I can't let this go. That's why I'm going to tell you everything, even if it destroys my life. I've been driving Route 47 for 12 years, the longest, most dangerous school bus route in North America. 320 miles of wilderness roads, serving mining camps and homesteads scattered across interior Alaska. I've pulled kids out of overturned vehicles in -40 weather. I've driven through forest fires and avalanche zones. I've had my bus attacked by a grizzly bear protecting her cubs. The state pays me double hazard pay because statistically, I should have died on this job years ago. But what they asked me to do 3 weeks ago wasn't emergency rescue or route maintenance. It was a cover-up operation, and I almost became part of it. Emma was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes 2 months ago. The medical bills were crushing us. Even with insurance, we were looking at bankruptcy. When District Supervisor Karen Walsh called me into her office, I thought she was going to offer overtime hours. Instead, she slid a manila envelope across her desk. "Tom, we have a situation that requires your particular skills," she said, not meeting my eyes. "There's been an incident near Chicken. We need someone we trust to go out there and clean things up." Inside the envelope were crime scene photos. A school bus, an old 1972 model, half to crash deep in a ravine about 2 miles outside Chicken. The front end was half to call, completely destroyed, like it had hit something solid at high speed. But what made my hands shake wasn't the damage. It was the date stamp on the photos. July 15th, 2024. 2 weeks ago, and the bus was full of children's belongings, backpacks, lunchboxes, sneakers, 23 sets of them. "Tom, this never happened," Walsh said quietly. "That bus was reported stolen from our surplus lot 6 months ago. Nobody was supposed to be driving it. But if this gets out, if the media discovers we had an unregistered vehicle in operation," she didn't need to finish. The Fairbanks School District was already under federal investigation for safety violations and budget mismanagement. One more scandal would shut us down completely. Hundreds of drivers would lose their jobs, including me, right when Emma needed expensive daily medication for the rest of her life. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. "Drive out there tomorrow. Document that the crash site has been properly cleaned up. Sign paperwork confirming no evidence remains. Do this quietly, and there's a promotion waiting for you. Route supervisor position, desk job, full medical coverage for Emma." I should have asked more questions, should have demanded to know who was driving that bus, should have asked why 23 kids' belongings were in a stolen vehicle that never happened. But Emma's insulin costs $800 a month, and supervisor positions come with premium insurance. I left Fairbanks at dawn with a full tank of gas and a stack of official forms. The drive to Chicken takes 3 hours on the Taylor Highway, mostly gravel road that winds through mountains and forest. My bus was a 2019 International with all the safety equipment, but I felt like I was driving to my own execution. About 30 miles outside Chicken, I hit the first checkpoint. State police had the road blocked. Officer Jenkins waved me through without checking my credentials. "You the cleanup crew?" he asked. "Something like that." "Good. We've been getting strange reports from this area all week. Campers claiming they saw school children walking the roads at night. Hikers hearing kids singing in the woods, probably just wind effects from the old mine shafts, but the brass wants it documented as resolved." Wind effects. Right. 20 miles further, I hit the second checkpoint. This one wasn't state police. Private security. Corporate vehicles with no identifying marks. The guard checked my ID against a list. "Thomas Rodriguez? Fairbanks School District? That's me. You're expected. Here's a radio. Channel 7. Check in every hour. Don't deviate from your assigned route. Don't photograph anything except what's on your checklist. Don't talk to any civilians you might encounter. He handed me the radio and a GPS device with a pre-programmed route. Follow this exactly. Any deviation will be noted. As I drove the final stretch into Chicken, the corporate radio crackled with voices I didn't recognize. Mining operation updates, security protocols, weather warnings. This wasn't just a cleanup job. This was a full containment operation. The town looked different than I remembered from previous evaluations. Fewer buildings. More no trespassing signs. Security cameras on poles that definitely hadn't been there before. And it was quiet. Not just small town quiet. Dead quiet. No birds. No insects. Even my bus engine seemed muffled. I parked at the coordinates they'd given me and checked my paperwork. I was supposed to photograph the crash site, document that all debris had been removed, and confirm that no hazardous materials remained. Simple enough. Except when I walked to the edge of the ravine, there was no crash site, no skid marks, no broken trees, no scattered debris. The photos in my envelope showed a massive impact crater with twisted metal and scattered belongings everywhere. But the ravine was pristine, like nothing had ever happened. Either those photos were fake, or someone had done an impossibly thorough cleanup job in 2 weeks. I was taking the required photos when I heard singing. Children's voices, faint and distant, coming from deeper in the woods. The song was familiar, "This Old Man," but the words were wrong. This old bus, it played knick-knack with our bones, with a knick-knack paddywhack. Hear the children moan. This old bus brought dead kids home. The corporate radio on my belt exploded with static, then cleared to frantic voices. Unit 7, report your position immediately. Unit 7, you are off designated route. I turned it off and followed the singing. The voices got louder as I went deeper into the woods. Multiple children now, maybe 20 or 30, all singing the same twisted nursery rhyme in perfect unison. But they weren't singing different verses, just the same horrible verse over and over again. I found them in a clearing about half a mile from the road. 23 children sitting in neat rows like they were on an invisible school bus. Their clothes were from different decades. 1,920 seconds. Wool coats, 1,940 seconds. Overalls, 1,960 seconds. Bell-bottoms, 1,980 seconds. Windbreakers. Some wore modern sneakers and carried current backpacks. They were all facing forward, watching something I couldn't see. All singing that nightmare song. At the front stood a woman in a 1,920 seconds dress. She had her back to me, conducting their choir with graceful hand movements. None of them noticed me watching. I pulled out my phone to record this, but the screen was dead, completely black, even though it had been fully charged. The corporate radio crackled back to life by itself. Unit 7, return to your vehicle immediately. Do not engage with any individuals in the area. This is a direct order from Northern Resources Corporation. Northern Resources Corporation. I'd heard that name before, but couldn't place it. The woman at the front of the group turned around. Her face was burned away on one side, leaving exposed bone and sinew around her mouth and eye socket. But she was still beautiful somehow, still elegant in her movements. "Mr. Rodriguez," she said, and her voice was perfectly clear despite her ruined mouth. "We've been waiting for you." All 23 children turned to look at me. Some had normal faces. Some had faces marked by fire or frostbite or violence. Some had no faces at all, just smooth skin where features should be. "We know about Emma," the woman continued. "We know about her diabetes. We know about the medical bills. We know about the promotion they promised you." My legs felt like they were filling with lead. I couldn't move. "We know about all the children," she said, gesturing to the group around her. "The ones who died in 1924 when Northern Resources let the school furnace break to save money. The ones who died in 1947 when they ignored the ice warnings and sent the bus across weak lake ice. The ones who died in 1963 when they used defective steel in the bridge construction. The ones who died in 1981 when they sold buses with faulty brake systems. The ones who died 2 weeks ago when they put 23 children in a stolen, uninspected bus and sent them on a field trip." She gestured to the children around her. Each group was wearing clothes from a different era. Every few decades, Northern Resources kills more children. Corporate negligence, cost-cutting measures, bribery of safety inspectors. And every time, they cover it up. Pay off the families. Destroy the evidence. Threaten anyone who might talk. The corporate radio on my belt was screaming now. Unit 7, you are in violation of containment protocols. Return to base immediately or face prosecution. The woman smiled with her ruined face. They can hear everything we say, Tom. They've been listening the whole time. They know you found us. Behind me, I could hear vehicles approaching through the woods. Multiple engines, moving fast. You have a choice, she continued. Take our story back with you. Tell people what really happened here. Fight for the living children. Or join us here in the woods and let Emma grow up knowing her father chose money over justice. The children stood up, forming a circle around me. Not threatening, just waiting. Their eyes were filled with hope I didn't deserve. If I tell this story, I said, they'll destroy me. They'll say I'm crazy. They'll make sure I never work again. Emma needs my insurance. Yes, the woman agreed. They will do all of that. But if I don't tell it, more children die. Yes, they will. Through the trees, I could see flashlight beams, security teams in tactical gear, moving in formation. The woman held out her hand to me. Choose quickly, Tom. They're almost here. I looked at her burned face, at the children around us, decades of victims, generations of corporate murder. Then I thought about Emma, alone at home, testing her blood sugar with equipment we could barely afford. I made my choice, but not the one they expected. I grabbed the corporate radio and switched to the emergency frequency. This is Tom Rodriguez, Fairbanks School District. I'm at the chicken site and I've found evidence of multiple child fatalities. I need state police, FBI, and the media here immediately. Northern Resources Corporation is covering up decades of negligent homicides. The radio exploded with panicked voices. Cut transmission now. I kept talking. There are bodies in these woods. Children who died because corporations value profits over safety. I have documentation, I have evidence, and I'm not staying quiet anymore. The security teams burst into the clearing, weapons drawn. Drop the radio, one of them shouted. Step away from the... He stopped mid-sentence, staring at the children. 23 sets of eyes looking back at him with quiet accusation. You can see them too, I realized. The lead security officer lowered his weapon slightly. We've always been able to see them. That's why we're here. That's why this place stays closed. The woman in the 1,922nd dress stepped forward. Officer Matthews, she said, and I could see recognition in his eyes. You were supposed to protect children. All of you were. Matthews' hands were shaking. We have families. We have mortgages. They said if we kept quiet. They said the same thing to Tom, the woman replied. But he chose differently. One by one, the security team lowered their weapons. In the distance, I could hear sirens approaching. Real sirens. State police responding to my emergency call. The corporate radio crackled one last time. All units, abort operation. Repeat, abort operation. Destroy all evidence and evacuate immediately. But it was too late. The secret was out. The children began to fade as the first police cars reached the clearing. Not disappearing, exactly. More like they were becoming transparent, their job finally done. The woman in the 1,922nd dress was the last to go. Thank you, Tom, she said. The living children will be safer now. And then they were gone. The state police found me sitting alone in the clearing, surrounded by security officers who all corroborated my story. They found corporate documents hidden in the woods, decades of cover-up files, bribery records, falsified safety reports. They found the real crash site, hidden under tons of deliberately placed debris. And they found the bodies, 23 children who died 2 weeks ago when Northern Resources put them in a stolen, uninspected bus for a special field trip to keep them quiet about safety violations they'd witnessed at the mining operation. The FBI investigation brought down the entire Northern Resources leadership. 15 executives went to prison. Dozens of officials were charged with conspiracy and negligent homicide. The families of all victims, past and present, received full compensation. I lost my job, of course, The school district fired me for violating protocol and compromising an ongoing investigation. No transportation company in Alaska will hire me. My name is poison in the industry. But Emma gets her insulin through a victim's compensation fund. She'll get her medication for free for the rest of her life. And every school bus in Alaska now has federally mandated safety inspections performed by independent contractors, not corporate-owned companies. The children's voices saved more children. That's worth being unemployable. I'm uploading this recording to every news outlet, every horror podcast, every investigative journalism platform I can find. Not because I want attention, but because these stories need to be told. Because corporate executives need to know that someone is watching, someone is keeping track. And because the children deserve to have their stories remembered. The ghost town of Chicken has been quiet since the arrests. No more sightings, no more singing in the woods. The children found their peace when justice was finally served. But there are other ghost towns in Alaska, other corporate cover-ups, other dead children waiting for someone brave enough to tell their stories. If you work for a mining company, a transportation contractor, or any business that puts profits before safety, IDA, know that someone is watching. Someone is listening. And someday, when you least expect it, those children you failed to protect might come looking for someone willing to tell the truth. Choose wisely. Transcript ends. FBI case file update. The Northern Resources investigation resulted in 47 indictments and the largest corporate safety fraud prosecution in Alaskan history. Tom Rodriguez was granted federal whistleblower protection and immunity from prosecution. His testimony was instrumental in securing convictions against all charged parties. Victim Compensation Fund. Established $127 million trust for families of children killed by Northern Resources. Negligence spanning 1924 to 2024. Fund includes full medical coverage for family members, educational scholarships, and ongoing counseling services. Corporate safety reform. The Chicken Safety Act, passed by Alaska legislature, requires independent safety inspections for all child transportation, prohibits corporate self-certification, and establishes criminal liability for executives who knowingly endanger children. Memorial status. The Chicken Children's Memorial was dedicated in 2025, listing all 47 children who died due to Northern Resources negligence. The memorial includes an eternal flame and a promise, never again, never forgotten. Personal update. Tom Rodriguez now works as a federal safety inspector, ensuring compliance with the new regulations he helped create. Emma Rodriguez, now age 9, is healthy and active thanks to full medical coverage. She wants to be a bus driver like her dad when she grows up. The children's voices have been silent since justice was served, but they're still watching, still waiting, still ready to speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. My name is Jennifer Park, and I've been running Park Professional Cleaning Services in Alaska for 8 years. I hold a state commercial cleaning license, hazmat certification, and I'm bonded and insured for up to $2 million. I got into this business after my husband died in a mining accident. Needed work that would let me support my daughter Emma while staying close to home. I specialize in what other companies won't touch: crime scene cleanup, hoarding situations, and properties that have been abandoned so long they're basically biological hazards. My rates are high, but I'm thorough, discreet, and I've never walked away from a job. That perfect record almost got me killed last month near the ghost town of Iditarod. Emma always teases me about my disaster kit, the extra supplies I keep in my truck for the worst-case scenarios. Industrial respirators, Tyvek suits, emergency flares, satellite phone, even a .44 Magnum that I pray I'll never need to use. After what I found in those cabins, I'm upgrading everything. The call came on a Tuesday morning in late September. Margaret Hendricks from Anchorage Property Management, CHA, a client I'd worked with for 3 years. She sounded stressed, which wasn't like her. Jennifer, I need someone I can trust for a delicate situation. We've got 5 cabins near Iditarod that need assessment and cleaning. Previous owner died. New owner wants them tourist-ready by spring. Problem is, we've had 3 cleaning crews quit already. They won't say why. That should have been my first red flag. In 8 years, I'd only had 2 crews quit on me, both because of drug labs that were worse than advertised. But Margaret was offering $8,000 for a week's work, and Emma's college fund needed every penny. What's the real story, Margaret? Squatters? Meth lab? I need to know what I'm walking into. Nothing like that. Previous crews said the cabins felt wrong somehow. Probably just spooked by the Kwantu Thad. Isolation. You know how it is. City cleaners aren't used to being alone in the wilderness. I should have pushed harder for details, but $8,000 was $8,000. The drive to Iditarod takes about 4 hours from Anchorage on good roads. The last hour is on logging trails that barely qualify as roads. I'd researched the area the night before. Iditarod was Alaska's largest city during the 1892 gold rush, home to over 10,000 people. By 1920, it was completely abandoned. Now it's just scattered foundations and collapsed buildings slowly being reclaimed by the forest. The cabins were 2 miles past the ghost town, connected by a dirt road that looked like it hadn't been maintained in decades. As I drove deeper into the woods, I noticed something strange: the complete absence of wildlife. No birds, no squirrels, not even insects. Just dead silence under a gray October sky. The 5 cabins were arranged in a rough pentagon, each about 60 feet apart. They were substantial log structures, probably built in the 1972 as hunting lodges. From the outside, they looked weathered but solid. The silence was so complete I could hear my own heartbeat. I always start with the largest building to get a sense of what I'm dealing with. The front door of the center cabin was unlocked, which wasn't unusual for remote properties. But the moment I stepped inside, every instinct I'd developed over 8 years started screaming. The air was wrong. Thick and humid, with a sweet smell like overripe fruit mixed with something medicinal. Every surface was covered with a thin, translucent film that looked like plastic wrap but moved slightly in the still air. When I touched it with my gloved finger, it felt warm and seemed to contract away from the contact. I've cleaned up after floods, fires, and decomposition. I know what mold looks like, what bacterial growth feels like. This wasn't any of those things. This was something alive. I pulled out my phone to document what I was seeing. But the screen showed no signal, not unusual in remote areas. My satellite communicator was also dead, which was unusual. The LED indicators that should have been blinking steadily were dark. Moving deeper into the cabin, I found the source of the sweet smell. In the main bedroom, 3 large sacks hung from the ceiling beams like giant spider egg cases. They were made from the same translucent material that covered everything else, but thicker, more substantial. Through the cloudy walls, I could see dark shapes inside. Human shapes. I cut into the first sack with my utility knife, and what spilled out changed everything I thought I knew about the world. It was a woman, maybe 40 years old, wearing hiking clothes from what looked like the early 2000s. But she wasn't dead. Her eyes were open, staring at nothing, and she was breathing in slow, shallow gasps. Her skin had a waxy, translucent quality, and when I checked her pulse, it was barely detectable. She was alive, but something was keeping her in a state of suspended animation. "Can you hear me?" I whispered, but there was no response. Her eyes didn't track movement, didn't react to light. She was breathing, but everything else that made her human seemed to be gone. That's when I heard the sound from outside. A low, rhythmic humming that seemed to come from underground. It was barely audible, but I could feel it in my chest, like standing too close to a massive generator. I should have run. Should have cut the other 2 people free and tried to get them to my truck. Instead, I did what I always do. I investigated the problem thoroughly before deciding how to handle it. The humming was coming from a maintenance shed behind the cabin that I hadn't noticed before. The door was partially buried in fallen leaves, as if it hadn't been opened in years. But when I cleared the debris away, I found fresh scratches around the lock. Inside the shed was a wooden trapdoor leading to what looked like a root cellar. The humming was definitely coming from below, along with that sweet, medicinal smell. Against every survival instinct I possessed, I opened the trapdoor and shined my flashlight down. What I saw in that underground chamber will haunt me until the day I die. The space had been carved out of the earth and lined with the same translucent material that covered the cabin surfaces. But down here, it was thick enough to walk on, pulsing gently like living tissue. The chamber extended in 5 directions, tunnels leading to each of the cabins above. In the center of the chamber was something that defied description. Imagine a massive organ, like a heart or liver, about 15 feet across and 8 feet tall. It was pink and translucent, with a network of tubes and vessels running through it. The humming sound came from its rhythmic contractions, like a heart beating in slow motion. But the most horrifying thing was what I could see moving inside it. Shapes pressing against the membrane from within. Human faces, distorted and barely recognizable, but unmistakably alive. They were moving their mouths as if trying to scream, but no sound came out. The tubes I'd seen running through the organism extended up through the ceiling, connecting to each cabin above. It was a feeding system. This thing was using the cabins as bait, trapping visitors and slowly absorbing them while keeping them alive for as long as possible. As I stood there in shock, the organism seemed to sense my presence. The humming got louder, more urgent, and I could see the faces inside pressing more frantically against the membrane. One of them, a young man with short dark hair, locked eyes with me. His mouth was moving, forming words I couldn't hear but could understand. "Help us." That's when the material under my feet started moving, flowing toward the organism like a slow river. The walls began contracting, and I realized the chamber was trying to close around me. I ran for the ladder, hearing wet, slithering sounds behind me as the space collapsed. I made it to ground level and slammed the trapdoor shut, but I could hear something large moving underneath the wooden planks. The scratching and scraping sounded like claws on stone, getting closer to the surface. When I reached my truck, all 4 tires had been slashed. Not random vandalism, precise cuts that would cause slow leaks, stranding me gradually rather than immediately. My emergency kit had been ransacked, satellite phones smashed, flares scattered. Something intelligent had planned this. That's when I understood the truth about Iditarod's abandonment. I'd brought my grandmother's journals. She'd been a teacher in early Alaska territory and kept detailed records of local events. That night, trapped in my truck with the doors locked, I read entries from 1897 by lamplight. More visitors to the mining camps have taken ill with the sleeping sickness. They arrive healthy and eager, but within days become lethargic and confused. Dr. Morrison believes it may be connected to the gas emissions from certain mine shafts, but I fear something worse. The affected seem to waste away while remaining conscious, as if something is feeding on their very life force. July 15th, 1897. Found 3 miners today in the woods near camp, sitting upright but completely unresponsive. They've been missing for a week, but showed no signs of starvation or exposure. When I touched James Murphy's arm, his skin felt cold and waxy, like a candle that's begun to melt. Most disturbing, they're still breathing. August 3rd, 1897. The town council has voted to evacuate Iditarod. Too many people lost. Too many found in that terrible condition. Whatever lives in this place, it's not natural. It's older than the gold, older than the trees. We're abandoning the richest strike in Alaska because we finally understand 1919. Some things are more BC, valuable than gold, and some appetites can never be satisfied. The creature under those cabins had been feeding for over a century, luring people to remote locations, keeping them alive in suspended animation while slowly draining their life energy. The cabins were just its latest hunting ground. Around midnight, I saw lights in the cabin windows, warm, inviting lights that made the buildings look cozy and welcoming. If I hadn't known what was inside, I might have been tempted to go back where it was warm and safe. At dawn, I started walking. It took 12 hours to reach the main highway, where a state trooper picked me up. I told him about finding people trapped in the cabins, but when we returned with backup, everything had changed. The cabins looked normal, old and dusty, but empty. No translucent material, no hanging sacks, no underground chamber. The shed was gone entirely, as if it had never existed. The only evidence of my experience was the slashed tires on my truck. But I noticed something the troopers didn't. All 4 officers who searched the cabins came out different. They moved slower, spoke in monotones, and their eyes had a distant, glassy look. Over the following weeks, I heard through police contacts that all 4 had called in sick with exhaustion and taken extended medical leave. The organism was still there, still feeding. It had just hidden itself better. I spent the next month researching everything I could find about Iditarod's history. What I discovered was a pattern going back to the 1,880 seconds. Every few years, people would disappear in that area. Not just individuals, entire prospecting parties, survey teams, hunting groups. Always the same story. They'd set up camp, then vanish without a trace. But there were also reports of survivors found months later, sitting catatonic in the wilderness. Always alive, always uninjured, but completely unresponsive. Local indigenous peoples had stories about that area going back generations. Warnings about a place where the earth itself was hungry. 3 weeks after my escape, I got a call from Margaret Hendricks. 3 new families had booked the cabins for a rustic Alaskan experience. The new owner had listed them online despite my warnings, advertising them as authentic ghost town accommodations. I drove back to Iditarod one last time. This time, I brought everything my grandmother had taught me about dealing with things that shouldn't exist. The cabin lights were on when I arrived, and I could hear laughter and conversation from inside. A normal family vacation, completely unaware of what was happening to them. Through the windows, I could see 4 people moving in slow motion, their faces slack and peaceful. They'd been there less than 2 days, but the process had already begun. I had 2 choices: try to rescue them and probably get trapped myself, or find a way to destroy the organism permanently. The answer came from my grandmother's final journal entry about Iditarod. Fire won't kill it. We tried that in '98. But the old Athabascan stories say it fears iron and salt water. Something about the mineral content disrupting its ability to maintain the feeding connections. I'd brought 3 cases of road salt and a toolbox full of iron railroad spikes. I spent that night driving the spikes into the ground around all 5 cabins, then poured salt in a continuous circle connecting them. At dawn, I called in an anonymous tip about a gas leak and potential explosion. When the state fire department arrived with their evacuation equipment, the spell was broken. The families came out of the cabins confused but alert, with no memory of the previous 2 days. The paramedics found them dehydrated and malnourished, but otherwise unharmed. As the evacuation vehicles drove away, I could hear something roaring underground. The earth around the cabins began to crack and sink, as if something massive was thrashing in. Pain below the surface. Trees within a 100-yard radius started dying, their leaves turning black and falling like snow. The iron and salt had worked, but not the way I'd expected. Instead of killing the organism, they'd severed its connection to the surface. It was still alive down there, but it could no longer extend its influence above ground. I never went back to that area, but I monitor news reports from the region. Over the past month, there have been 3 reports of minor earthquakes centered near the old Iditarod town site. Each time, local wildlife disappears for days before gradually returning. I still run my cleaning service, but I've changed my client screening process. Now I research the history of every property before I accept a job. If there are any reports of unexplained disappearances, strange illnesses, or unusual geological activity, I decline the work. Because I learned something in those cabins that most people never have to face. There are things in this world that are older and hungrier than human civilization. They've learned to hide, to adapt, to use our own desires for comfort and safety against us. The tourism industry wants you to believe that Alaska's ghost towns are fascinating historical sites, full of gold rush romance and frontier adventure. But some places are abandoned for reasons that have nothing to do with economic opportunity. Some places are abandoned because the things that live there never stopped being hungry. The cabins near Iditarod are still listed online. The ads describe them as remote and peaceful, perfect for disconnecting from the modern world. The reviews are all 5 stars, written by people who stayed one night and loved the deeply relaxing atmosphere and strangely restful sleep. If you see that listing, remember this story. Remember that some bargains are too good to be true, and some kinds of rest last forever. My daughter Emma is starting college next fall, and she wants to study archaeology. She's fascinated by Alaska's history, by the stories of boom towns and ghost towns scattered across the wilderness. I'm proud of her curiosity, but I've made her promise me one thing. If she ever finds a place where the silence is too complete, where the air feels too thick, where the ground seems to pulse with its own heartbeat, she'll turn around and walk away. Because some history is better left buried, and some appetites should never be fed. My name is Carlos Vega, and I've been working as a power line technician for Alaska Electric Cooperative for 12 years. I've fixed lines in blizzards, climbed poles in -40 weather, and restored power to towns cut off by avalanches. I thought I'd seen everything the Alaskan wilderness could throw at me. But what happened last Tuesday near the ghost town of McCarthy changed everything I thought I knew about what lives in the remote corners of our state. I started working for Alaska Electric right after high school. My dad was a lineman before me, and his dad before him. It's honest work that keeps the lights on for people who need them most. I've got my Class A CDL, journeyman electrician license, and certification for high-voltage work up to 35,000 volts. In 12 years, I've never had a serious accident or missed more than 3 days in a row. My supervisor always says I'm the guy he sends when the job absolutely has to get done right the first time. Most people don't understand what we do. They flip a switch and expect the lights to come on. They don't think about the thousands of miles of wire stretched across some of the most dangerous terrain in North America. Alaska Electric covers an area bigger than most states, and a lot of our customers live in places you can't reach without a helicopter or a four-wheel drive truck and half a day of driving. When a storm knocks out power to a research station or a small town, we're the ones who have to get out there and fix it, no matter what the weather's doing or how far it is from the nearest road. Last Tuesday started like any other day. I got to the yard at 6 in the morning, checked my truck, loaded my tools, and looked at the work orders. There was only one job on my list: restore power to the Wrangell Permafrost Research Station, about 5 miles northeast of Old McCarthy. The station had lost power during Sunday night's storm, and they needed it back online fast. Their freezer units were running on backup generator power, but that wouldn't last much longer. McCarthy used to be a real town back in the early 1900s. It was built around the Kennecott copper mine, and at its peak, it had hotels, saloons, and hundreds of people. But the copper ran out by the 1,930 seconds, and almost everyone left. Now it's mostly just ruins and a handful of buildings that tourists come to see in the summer. The research station was built there because the old mining equipment left the ground all torn up, making it perfect for studying how permafrost changes over time. I loaded my bucket truck with the usual gear: replacement insulators, section of wire, come-alongs, safety equipment, and my voltage tester. The drive from Anchorage to McCarthy takes about 5 hours on a good day, but the last 20 miles are rough dirt road that'll shake your teeth loose if you go too fast. I radioed dispatch that I was heading out and estimated I'd have the power back on by late afternoon. The weather was perfect for January, about 10 degrees above zero, with clear skies and no wind. My truck handled the mountain roads fine, and I made good time until I hit the dirt section. That's where you have to slow down and pick your way around the potholes and rocks. The forest on both sides of the road was thick with spruce trees, and I didn't see any other vehicles or people the whole way in. I found the problem right away. A big spruce tree had fallen across the main power line about a quarter mile before the research station. The tree was maybe 60 feet tall and 2 feet thick at the base. It had snapped 3 of the ceramic insulators and brought down about 50 yards of 12.5 kilovolts line. It was a typical storm damage job, messy but not complicated. I parked my truck on the shoulder and set up my safety zone with orange cones and warning signs. The first thing you always do is test the line to make sure it's really dead. Even though dispatch had confirmed the outage, you never trust that information with your life. I used my hot stick to check the line, and it was cold. Good. Then I radioed the control center to confirm the line was locked out and tagged out on their end. I was setting up my bucket truck when I heard footsteps crunching through the snow behind me. I turned around and saw a woman in hiking gear walking up the road. She looked to be about 30 years old, average height, brown hair pulled back in a ponytail. She was wearing a nice winter jacket and hiking boots that looked expensive. "Need any help?" she asked, stopping about 10 feet away from my truck. "Thanks, but I need you to stay back," I told her. "This is high-voltage equipment. Even though the power's off, it's not safe for civilians." She smiled and nodded. "Of course, I'm just hiking around the old town. Fascinating place, isn't it? All that history just sitting there in the woods." I agreed that it was interesting and went back to extending the boom on my bucket truck. When I looked up again a few minutes later, she was walking away toward the old McCarthy ruins. I didn't think much of it. We get hikers and tourists out there all the time, especially the kind who want to see the old mining equipment. The tree removal took about 2 hours. I had to cut it into sections with my chainsaw and use the bucket truck's winch to drag the pieces off the power line. The hardest part was replacing the broken insulators while working from the bucket 40 feet in the air. But everything went smoothly, and by noon, I had new wire strung and the insulators replaced. I was packing up my tools when I heard a vehicle coming up the road. It was a Park Service truck, the kind the rangers use when they're patrolling the area. The truck stopped, and a woman got out. She was wearing the standard Park Service uniform, AD, green pants, tan shirt, and a campaign hat. Here's the thing that made me stop what I was doing. This ranger looked exactly like the hiker I'd met earlier. Same face, same hair, same build. The only difference was the uniform. "How's it going?" she asked, walking over to my truck. "Just checking on your progress. Everything going okay?" "Yeah, just finished up," I said, studying her face. "Are you related to that hiker who was here earlier? You two look a lot alike." She frowned and shook her head. "Hiker? I haven't seen anyone else on this road today. Been patrolling the area since 8 this morning." That didn't make sense. The road only went to one place, the research station and the old town. There was nowhere else for the hiker to have gone without passing the ranger on the way out. And they looked exactly the same, not similar, identical. "Must have missed her," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. "Maybe she went cross-country." The ranger nodded and got back in her truck. "Well, thanks for getting their power back on. Those researchers get pretty upset when their equipment stops working." I watched her drive away toward the research station, then finished loading my tools. Something about the whole situation felt wrong, but I couldn't put my finger on what it was. I'd been working alone in remote areas for years, and you develop a sense for when things aren't quite right. I was about to leave when another vehicle pulled up, a white pickup with Wrangell Permafrost Research Station painted on the side. A woman in a lab coat got out and walked over to my truck. "You must be the power company," she said. "Thanks so much for fixing our lines. We were starting to worry about our freezer samples." I felt my stomach drop. This woman had the exact same face as the hiker and the ranger. Same brown hair, same features, same build. But she was wearing a lab coat and talking like a scientist. "No problem," I managed to say. "Everything should be working fine now." "Would you like to see the research station?" she asked. "We don't get many visitors, and it's quite interesting. We're studying how climate change affects permafrost stability." "Thanks, but I need to get back," I said quickly. "Got another job this afternoon." That was a lie. I didn't have another job. I just wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. 3 women with identical faces was way beyond coincidence. Something was very wrong. I drove back toward the main road faster than I should have on that rough surface. My truck bounced and rattled over the potholes, but I didn't care. I just wanted to put some distance between me and whatever was happening back there. About halfway to the main road, I saw a man in camouflage walking through the trees near the old McCarthy buildings. He was carrying a hunting rifle and walking like he was tracking something. I slowed down and rolled down my window. "Hey," I called out, "you seen any women hikers around here today?" The man turned toward my truck and started walking over. As he got closer, I felt my hands start to shake on the steering wheel. He had the same face as the 3 women. Exactly the same face, just on a man's body. "Been alone all day," he said when he reached my truck. "Why? You looking for someone?" Up close, I could see that his face wasn't quite right. It was too smooth, too perfect. No scars, no wrinkles, no little imperfections that real faces have. His skin looked almost waxy, like it was made of plastic. And his voice sounded strange, like he was trying to copy how people in Alaska talk, but getting it slightly wrong. "No, just curious," I said. "Have a good hunt." I rolled up my window and drove away as fast as the road would let me. In my rearview mirror, I watched the man stand there, watching my truck until I went around a curve and lost sight of him. I didn't stop until I reached the gas station in Chitina, about an hour down the mountain. I needed coffee and time to think about what I'd seen. The gas station was one of those small places that serves the dot time. A local community, EPS, just a few pumps, some basic groceries, and a lunch counter. I went inside and grabbed a cup of coffee from the pot behind the counter. The cashier was a young woman, maybe 25, with blonde hair and a friendly smile. "Cold day for working outside," she said as she rang up my coffee. I looked at her face and my blood went cold. It was the same face again, the exact same features, just with different hair color. "You from around here?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Born and raised," she said with a smile. "Lived in Chitina my whole life." But her accent was wrong. She was trying to sound like a local, but it came out forced, like someone who'd learned to talk by listening to recordings instead of growing up here. I paid for my coffee and grabbed a copy of the local newspaper from the rack by the door. I sat in my truck and read while I tried to calm down. On page 3, there was a story that made my heart race. 7 hikers missing near McCarthy. The headline read, "The article said that 7 people had disappeared in the area over the past 2 months. All of them were solo travelers or small groups." But here's the really weird part. Several witnesses had reported seeing the missing hikers after they were reported missing. The same people had been spotted in different locations at the same time. I drove straight home to Anchorage and spent the evening searching online for similar stories. What I found made my skin crawl. There were posts on hiking forums and paranormal websites about something called a face stealer in remote parts of Alaska. According to these reports, it was some kind of creature that could perfectly copy human appearance. The stories all followed the same pattern. People would encounter multiple individuals with identical faces in areas where there should have been few or no other people. Witnesses described the faces as being too perfect, no natural flaws or aging marks. The creature seemed to be studying human behavior by impersonating different people and seeing how others reacted. One post from a hunting guide said he'd seen dozens of people with the same face wandering around an abandoned logging camp. They all wore different clothes and acted like different people, but they all had the exact same face. When he tried to photograph them, they scattered into the woods like animals. I couldn't stop thinking about what I'd seen. The more I thought about it, the more details I remembered that didn't make sense. The way the ranger claimed she'd been patrolling since morning but hadn't seen the hiker. How the scientist knew exactly when I'd arrived, even though I hadn't called ahead. The perfect way each person looked, like they were wearing masks. A week later, I convinced my coworker Jim to come back to McCarthy with me. I told him I wanted to document what I'd seen, maybe get some proof that would make sense of it all. We brought cameras and planned to spend the whole day photographing the area and anyone we encountered. The town looked completely normal when we arrived. We parked at the old general store and walked around the ruins for an hour, taking pictures of everything. No sign of the people with duplicate faces, just empty buildings and rusted mining equipment. But we found things that made my blood run cold. Behind the old hotel, there were personal belongings scattered around like someone had just dropped them and walked away. Driver's licenses, hiking backpacks, cameras, and water bottles. I recognized some of the names from the newspaper article about the missing hikers. In one of the old mining cabins, we found something even worse. There were piles of clothes arranged on the floor like people had been wearing them and then just vanished. Jackets, pants, boots, and socks all laid out in the shape of human bodies, but empty. No signs of violence, no blood, nothing to suggest what had happened to the people who'd been wearing them. Jim took photos of everything while I searched the cabin. Under a pile of debris in the corner, I found a journal that belonged to one of the missing hikers. The last entry was dated 3 days before I'd been called out to fix the power line. "Saw the strangest thing today," the entry read. "Met 5 different people around the old town, but they all had the exact same face. Thought I was losing my mind until I realized none of them cast shadows in the sunlight. Going to investigate tomorrow." There were no more entries after that. We developed Jim's photos when we got back to Anchorage, but something was wrong with every picture that showed a human figure. The faces were all blurred beyond recognition, like something had interfered with the camera when it tried to capture them. Even in the photos of the empty clothes, there were strange shadows that looked almost like human shapes. I reported everything to the state police, but they said the evidence was inconclusive. They took our statements and said they'd look into it, but I could tell they didn't believe us. The officer who took my report kept asking the same questions over and over, like he was trying to find holes in my story. It wasn't until I was leaving the police station that I noticed something that made my stomach turn. The officer's face was just a little too perfect. No wrinkles, no scars, no little marks that real faces accumulate over a lifetime. His skin had that same waxy, artificial look I'd seen near McCarthy. "I don't work for Alaska Electric anymore," I quit the next day and moved to Seattle. I told my supervisor I was taking a job with a private contractor, which was true enough. I couldn't stay in Alaska knowing that thing was out there, learning to be human by stealing the faces of people who got too close. Sometimes I wonder how many of them there are now. How many missing hikers and hunters have provided faces for these creatures to wear? How far they've spread beyond the remote areas where they started. When I see someone with a perfect face, someone whose accent doesn't quite match where they claim to be from, I wonder if I'm looking at another one of those things. I've heard that Alaska Electric hired a new crew to service the McCarthy area. I hope they're careful. I hope they stay on the main roads and don't trust anyone they meet out there, no matter how friendly they seem. Because whatever's living in those abandoned towns isn't human, and it's getting better at pretending to be. The worst part is not knowing what happened to the real people. Are they dead? Are they trapped somewhere while these creatures wear their faces? I have nightmares about finding myself face to face with a perfect copy of my own features, wearing my clothes and speaking with my voice. If you work in remote areas, if you spend time in abandoned places where people used to live, watch out for faces that are too perfect. Watch for people who show up where they shouldn't be, who know things they shouldn't know, who talk just a little bit wrong for where they claim to be from. And if you ever see multiple people with identical faces, don't stick around to investigate, just leave. Get as far away as you can and don't look back. Because once they know you've seen them, once they know you understand what they really are, they might decide they need to learn how to wear your face too. My name is Lisa Chen, and until 6 months ago, I was one of Alaska's most successful wedding photographers. 12 years in the business, over 300 ceremonies captured, and a reputation for getting the impossible shot no matter what went wrong. Blizzards, drunk groomsmen, family feuds, I'd handled it all, but I'm not a wedding photographer anymore. I can't be. Not after what I learned about some moments in time, and how certain kinds of love refuse to die even when they should. What happened in Portage last February didn't just end my career, it ended my marriage, my faith in reality, and my ability to look at any camera without seeing death staring back at me. I'm telling this story because 3 other photographers have contacted me since then. 3 people who answered the same type of call I did, who drove to the same abandoned places, who came back changed. We all quit within weeks of our experiences. And we all have the same photos on our cameras, pictures of people who died decades ago, still trying to finish what they started. This is the most disturbing thing about Alaska's ghost towns. It's not that the dead won't leave, it's that they won't let the living leave either. Section 2. Professional context and setup. I should have known something was wrong from the beginning, but I was desperate. My husband David had been laid off from his engineering job in December, and I was carrying all our bills on wedding photography income. In Alaska, that means summers full of work and winters scraping by. February is always the hardest month. My studio's in my garage behind our house in Eagle River. 2 Canon 5D Mark IVs. Professional lighting, backup equipment for everything. Wedding photography isn't just about pretty pictures. You're documenting the most expensive day of someone's life with no second chances. One missed shot, one equipment failure, and your reputation is destroyed. I'd been married to David for 8 years, but lately we'd been struggling. The financial pressure, his job loss, my crazy schedule during wedding season. We'd been talking about starting a family, but kept putting it off for better timing that never came. At 34, I was starting to wonder if I'd waited too long for everything I'd wanted. The call came on February 10th, a Tuesday evening. I was editing photos from a January wedding when my business phone rang. Lasting Moments Photography, this is Lisa. I need a photographer for February 14th. The voice was female, young, with a slight accent I couldn't place. Valentine's Day. It has to be Valentine's Day. That's very short notice, I said, checking my calendar. But I happen to be available. Where's the venue? Portage, the old town site. I laughed, thinking it was a prank call. Ma'am, there's nothing in Portage. It's been abandoned since 1964. I know exactly what Portage is, she said, her voice turning cold. My grandparents were married there in 1965, just before everyone had to leave. I want to honor their memory with a ceremony in the same place. The story tugged at my heart. I'd lost my own grandparents recently, and I understood wanting to connect with family history. I appreciate the sentiment, but there are no facilities there. No power, no heat, no shelter. In February, it could be dangerous. We're prepared for an outdoor ceremony. We'll provide everything needed. The payment is $3,000 for 6 hours. $3,000. More than I'd made in the past 2 months combined. Money that could cover our mortgage payment and David's student loans. Let me talk to my husband and get back to you, I said. I need an answer now, she insisted. This ceremony has been planned for a very long time. If you can't do it, I need to find someone else immediately. I thought about our bills, about David's growing depression over being unemployed, about how this one job could take the financial pressure off us for months. Okay, I said, I'll do it. Wonderful. My name is Margaret Henderson. I'll email you the details. She hung up before I could ask any questions. Within minutes, I had an email with a location pin and a deposit of $1,000 in my account. No return phone number, no address, just the money and the coordinates. When David got home, I told him about the job. He was skeptical about the location, but excited about the money. $3,000 for 6 hours? He said. That's like $50 an hour. Take it and run. If I'd known what I was really agreeing to, I would have deleted that email and blocked the number. But we needed the money, and I thought I could handle anything. I was wrong. Section 3. First anomaly, February 14th was brutally cold, even for Alaska. 15 below with clear skies and no wind. I loaded my truck with extra equipment, hand warmers for the cameras, backup batteries and heated cases, emergency supplies in case I got stuck. The drive to Portage takes an hour from Eagle River, most of it on the Seward Highway with no cell service. Portage sits at the end of a side road that most people never take. Before 1964, it was a railroad town of about 200 people. The Good Friday earthquake didn't just shake the ground, it dropped the entire area 6 feet, letting salt water flood in with every tide. The soil became unstable. Buildings started sinking, and by 1965 everyone was evacuated permanently. What's left now are concrete foundations slowly disappearing into marshy ground, a few tilted utility poles, and the skeletal remains of buildings being reclaimed by wilderness. In winter, it's a moonscape of snow and ruins surrounded by mountains and glaciers. But as I drove down the access road that morning, I saw something that shouldn't have been there. Cars. 3 black sedans parked in a neat row, all looking like pristine 1962 models. A 1963 Cadillac, a 1964 Lincoln Continental, and a 1965 Buick Riviera. Classic cars in perfect condition, sitting in snow without a single flake on their roofs or hoods. I parked behind them and grabbed my camera bag. That's when I noticed my equipment acting strange. My Canon's LCD screen was flickering between the normal digital display and what looked like old film camera settings. F-stops, shutter speeds, and film ASA numbers that shouldn't exist on a digital camera. The cold, I thought. Electronics get weird in extreme temperatures. I walked toward the town site and saw the wedding party gathered around the foundation of what used to be the community center. About 20 people in formal wear, but not modern formal wear. The women wore elaborate 1960 updos with pillbox hats and veils. The men had narrow lapels, thin ties, and hair slicked back with pomade. Everything looked authentically vintage, down to the shoes and jewelry. But something felt wrong about their clothes. They weren't costume shop rentals or careful reproductions. They looked genuinely aged, with the subtle wear patterns and fabric deterioration that only comes from actual decades of existence. Like they'd been stored in a closet since 1965 and pulled out for this ceremony. "Are you the photographer?" A young woman approached me, and I got my first close look at the bride. Margaret Henderson was beautiful in an old-fashioned way. Dark hair in a perfect bouffant, pale skin, and bright red lipstick. Her wedding dress was stunning. Ivory lace with a full skirt and cathedral train. But like everything else, it looked genuinely vintage. The lace had the slight yellowing of age, and the satin had the particular sheen of old silk. "Yes, I'm Lisa. You must be Margaret. This is quite a unique location for a wedding." She smiled, and her teeth were perfect white pearls. This place means everything to my family. My grandparents, Robert and I, we. She paused, looking confused. I mean, my grandparents Robert and Margaret were married here. I'm Margaret too, named after my grandmother. The way she'd said it was odd, like she'd confused herself about her own family history. But brides get nervous, and people misspeak when they're stressed. Well, congratulations. Should we start with some pre-ceremony shots? Oh yes, she said, her smile brightening. We've been waiting such a long time for this. I started taking test shots, checking my exposure settings. The afternoon light was beautiful, reflecting off the snow and mountains. Through my viewfinder, the wedding party looked perfect, elegant, happy, romantic, classic wedding photography material. But when I lowered the camera to check my position, something was wrong. For just a split second, the area looked empty. No people, no decorations, just snow-covered ruins and abandoned folding chairs that looked rusted and weathered. I blinked hard and looked again. The wedding party was back, exactly as before. Altitude change, I told myself. Sometimes rapid elevation shifts can cause visual disturbances. I'd driven from sea level to a few hundred feet in less than an hour. But when I checked the photos on my camera's review screen, every fifth or sixth image showed the same thing my eyes had seen for that split second. Empty ruins. No people, just abandoned chairs and scattered debris that looked like it had been there for decades. That's when I started to understand that I wasn't photographing a wedding. I was photographing something much worse. Section 4. Escalation, The ceremony began without any announcement. Suddenly, all the guests were standing and facing an elderly man in a black suit who appeared to be the officiant. I positioned myself to capture the processional, following Margaret as she walked down the makeshift aisle between the folding chairs. Through my viewfinder, everything was perfect. Margaret was radiant, practically glowing with happiness. Her groom, a tall, handsome man with dark hair and a thin mustache, waited at the altar with tears in his eyes. The guests were smiling, some dabbing at their eyes with handkerchiefs. But I was starting to notice things that didn't make sense. None of the guests were talking to each other, despite being at a social event. No one was shivering, even though it was 15 below zero. No one had visible breath in the cold air. And when the wind picked up, none of their hair moved. I tried to get closer to hear the ceremony, but I couldn't make out any words. The officiant's mouth was moving, Margaret and her groom were responding, but there was no sound. Complete silence except for the wind and the crunch of snow under my boots. I started taking more photos, reviewing each one immediately. Wedding party, empty ruins, wedding party, empty ruins. The pattern was consistent. About 1 in every 5 photos showed the truth of what was actually there. Margaret, I called out during what seemed like a pause in the ceremony. Can I get you to turn slightly toward the light? She didn't respond. I walked closer and spoke louder. Margaret, can you hear me? She continued facing the officiant, smiling blissfully, as if I didn't exist. I reached out to touch her shoulder to get her attention. My hand passed right through her, not through fabric or clothing, through her entire body, like she was made of cold air. I tried again, reaching for her arm, her hand, her bouquet. Nothing solid, nothing real. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering. These weren't people in vintage costumes. These weren't people at all. I grabbed my phone to call for help, but there was no signal. Worse, the battery was draining rapidly, dropping from 60% to 20% in just minutes. I tried starting my truck to leave, but the engine wouldn't turn over. The headlights wouldn't come on. Even my flashlight was dying. Everything electronic was failing except for my camera. And my camera was the only thing showing me the truth. That I was alone in an abandoned ghost town, photographing people who had been dead for 60 years. But why could I see them? Why was my camera capturing them? And why had they specifically called me? The ceremony was reaching its climax. Through the viewfinder, I watched the officiant raise his hands in blessing. Margaret and her groom were exchanging rings, tears of joy streaming down their faces. The guests were standing and applauding silently. That's when I heard it. A sound like distant thunder, but it wasn't coming from the sky. It was coming from the mountains behind the wedding party. I lowered my camera and looked toward the sound. A massive wall of white was rushing down the mountainside, moving faster than anything natural. An avalanche, heading directly for the town site. But through my camera, the wedding party couldn't see it. They were still celebrating, still focused on the ceremony, completely unaware of the death bearing down on them. And suddenly I understood. This wasn't just a wedding. This was the recreation of a specific wedding. The wedding that ended in tragedy on the 14th of February 1965, when an unexpected avalanche buried 23 people during their Valentine's Day celebration. I was watching them die. Again. "Run!" I screamed. "Avalanche! Everyone run!" None of them could hear me. They were trapped in their moment of perfect happiness, doomed to repeat it forever, never knowing that in 30 seconds they would all be dead. I turned and ran toward my truck, but the snow was deep and I kept falling. Behind me, the avalanche was getting closer, the sound deafening. I could feel the ground shaking under my feet. I dove into my truck just as the wall of snow hit the town site. The vehicle rocked violently, snow and ice slamming against the windows, blocking out all light. The noise was like being inside a tornado, a freight train, and an earthquake all at once. Then, silence. Section 5. Climax. When I came to, it was dark. My truck was half buried in snow, but the engine was running again. The headlights were on, and according to my watch, it was past 8 p.m. I'd lost almost 6 hours. I dug myself out and looked around. The wedding site was empty. No chairs, no decorations, no people. Just snow-covered ruins and debris that clearly hadn't been disturbed in decades. But my camera was still around my neck, and when I checked the memory card, the photos were all there. Hundreds of images of Margaret and Robert's wedding ceremony. Beautiful, professional shots that documented every moment of their special day. I drove home in a daze, my hands shaking so badly I could barely hold the steering wheel. When I got to my studio, I immediately started researching Margaret and Robert Henderson. What I found destroyed what little sanity I had left. Valentine's Day tragedy in Portage. Alaska Daily News, the 15th of February 1965. 23 killed in unexpected avalanche during wedding celebration. Among the dead are newlyweds Margaret and Robert Henderson, both 22, who were married moments before the slide hit the town's community center. The article included a wedding photo taken just before the ceremony. Every face was identical to the people I'd photographed. Same clothes, same poses, same smiles. The only difference was that the newspaper photo was in black and white, and the people in it had been dead for almost 60 years. But there was more. Much more. I found marriage records. Margaret Elizabeth Sullivan had married Robert James Henderson on the 14th of February, 1965, at 2 p.m. in Portage, Alaska. The ceremony was conducted by Reverend William Walsh. 23 people attended, including the bride and groom. At 4:47 p.m., during the reception, an avalanche caused by unseasonably warm weather buried the entire wedding party. None of the bodies were ever recovered. The tragedy was considered one of Alaska's worst avalanche disasters. But here's what made my blood turn to ice. I found phone records. The number that had called me about the wedding belonged to Margaret Henderson, not a relative named after her. The actual Margaret Henderson who died in 1965. The deposit in my bank account came from a joint checking account belonging to Margaret and Robert Henderson, an account that had been closed in 1965 after their deaths. I had been hired by dead people to photograph their own funeral. Section 6. Resolution and aftermath. I tried reporting what happened to the Alaska State Troopers, but they thought I was having a breakdown. Ghost weddings? Payments from dead people? They suggested psychiatric evaluation. I couldn't explain the money in my account, $1,000 that had come from nowhere and couldn't be traced. I couldn't explain the photos on my camera that showed people who'd been dead for 60 years. I couldn't explain anything. David thought I was losing my mind. When I showed him the photos, he saw empty ruins. When I played the voicemail from Margaret, he heard static. The supernatural elements were only visible to me, which made me question my own sanity. But then other photographers started contacting me. First one, then two, then three. All wedding photographers who'd gotten similar calls. All hired to document ceremonies in abandoned places with tragic histories. All had photos of people who shouldn't exist. We formed a support group of sorts. 4 professional photographers who'd all quit the business within weeks of our experiences. We met monthly to share our stories and try to make sense of what had happened to us. That's when we learned the pattern. Ghost towns across Alaska, all sites of past tragedies, all somehow still inhabited by people who died decades ago. They were all trying to finish what they'd started. Weddings, interrupted by disasters, celebrations cut short by death. And they needed photographers, witnesses, people to document their continued existence, to prove that their love stories hadn't really ended. I divorced David 6 months later. Not because he didn't believe me, but because I couldn't bear being around anyone who reminded me of the life I'd lost. I moved to Seattle, changed my name, and started working in a bookstore. I haven't touched a camera since, but sometimes, late at night, I get calls on my old business phone that I never disconnected. Young women's voices asking for a photographer, brides who've been dead for decades, still trying to finish their weddings. I don't answer anymore. I can't. Because I learned something terrible in Portage that February day. Some kinds of love are so strong they survive death. And that love doesn't care if it drives the living insane. The Henderson wedding party is still there, I know. Still celebrating, still exchanging vows, still dying in that avalanche over and over again. They're trapped in their perfect moment, and they want to trap others with them. If you're a photographer and you get a call about a ceremony in an abandoned place, don't go. No matter how much money they offer, no matter how touching the story sounds. Because some moments are too dangerous to witness, and some love stories are too tragic to survive. The dead don't just want to be remembered, they want to take the living with them, one photograph at a time. And in the end, that's exactly what they did to me. I may still be breathing, but part of me never left Portage. Part of me is still there, watching that wedding, taking those photos, dying a little more with each shot. The most disturbing thing about Alaska's ghost towns isn't the ghosts themselves. It's how eagerly they welcome the living to join their eternal celebrations, and how willingly we accept their invitations, thinking we're just doing our jobs. But there are no jobs in ghost towns. There are only traps disguised as opportunities, and love stories that refuse to end even when they should. Margaret Henderson is still out there, calling photographers, offering money that comes from nowhere, promising the most unique wedding shoot of their careers. Don't answer, please. Don't make the same mistake I did, because some photographs cost more than money. They cost your sanity, your marriage, your life as you knew it. And the wedding that never ended is still looking for new guests to join the celebration.